A tunnel where the air itself killed hundreds of men before anyone bothered to write down their names. A valley where a wall of black sludge swallowed 16 towns in 3 hours flat. A bridge that stood for 39 years, passed every inspection, and then folded into a river during rush hour because of a crack you could barely see with your eyes. A national park so popular and so deceptively gentle-looking that more than 150 people have died inside it since 2007, most of them never leaving pavement. A hurricane that turned a postcard mountain village into a canyon overnight, less than 2 years ago. These are 20 real places scattered across the Appalachian Mountains, running through West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, and the Carolinas, and every fact you're about to hear is documented, dated, and checkable, pulled from federal investigations, court records, and news archives, not internet rumor. No legends, no campfire stories, just geology, water, coal, and the systems people built on top of all three. Every one of them far more dangerous than it looks in the brochure photos. Before the countdown starts, a quick bit of business. If any of this hits close to home, go ahead and subscribe, because we dig up a new corner of American danger every week. And frankly, the algorithm owes you one good recommendation after everything else it's fed you today. Here's the real question though. Where are you watching this from right now? Put it in the comments, because if you're anywhere near these hollows and ridge lines, you already know most of these places by a different nickname than the one we're using, and you are absolutely going to want to correct us. Good. That's what the comments section is for. Let's start the countdown at number 20. Number 20. The Kingston Fossil Plant, Roane County, Tennessee, in December of 2008. A dike holding back a coal ash pond gave way overnight, releasing more than 1 billion gallons of toxic slurry across 300 acres of land, the largest industrial spill in American history at that point. Nearly 30 times the volume of the Exxon Valdez, damaging or destroying dozens of homes in the process. Remarkably, nobody died in the collapse itself, but more than 30 of the roughly 900 workers hired to clean it up over the following years later died of brain cancer, lung cancer, leukemia, and other illnesses, conditions a federal jury eventually linked to their exposure on site without adequate protective gear. The disaster that made the news wasn't the one that actually killed people. Number 19. The Silver Bridge, Point Pleasant, West Virginia. On the evening of December 15, 1967, during rush hour traffic packed with Christmas shoppers, a single steel eye-bar in the suspension chain snapped from a hairline crack barely 1/10 of an inch deep. Hidden inside a design that used only one chain per side instead of the redundant multiple chains most suspension bridges relied on. The entire 700-foot center span folded straight down into the Ohio River in seconds, dragging 64 people and 32 vehicles down with it, and 46 of them did not survive. The bridge had passed every routine visual inspection for 39 straight years, because the flaw that killed those 46 people was buried on the inside of the metal, completely invisible from the outside, the entire time. It remains the deadliest bridge collapse in modern American history. Number 18. The Farmington Mine, Marion County, West Virginia. On November 20th, 1968, a methane explosion tore through the Console No. 9 mine with a force strong enough to be felt 12 miles away in the next town, sending flames shooting 150 feet into the sky. 99 men were working underground that morning. 21 made it out. The other 78 did not. And 19 of their bodies are still sealed somewhere inside that mountain today, never recovered, because rescuers eventually had to concrete the entrance shut just to smother the fires still burning below. The disaster directly led Congress to create modern federal mine safety law within a year. Number 17. The Sago Mine, Upshur County, West Virginia. On January 2, 2006, a lightning-triggered methane blast trapped 13 miners underground for nearly 2 full days. A garbled radio message led rescuers to believe all 12 trapped survivors had been found alive, and that false word reached the families waiting at a nearby church before it reached any news outlet. They celebrated for almost 3 hours before officials arrived to correct the record. 11 men were already dead, a 12th would die shortly after in a hospital bed, and only 1 miner walked out of that mine alive. Number 16. Upper Big Branch, Raleigh County, West Virginia. On April 5, 2010, a spark from mining equipment ignited a pocket of methane roughly 1,000 feet underground, and the coal dust explosion that followed killed 29 miners within minutes, the deadliest American mining disaster in 4 decades. Search crews initially found 25 bodies, then spent 4 more agonizing days searching before recovering the final 4 men, who had never made it to either underground safety chamber, walking past their bodies unknowingly on the very first day of the search. A later investigation concluded the blast had been entirely preventable, the direct result of ventilation systems the mine's owner had let fail for years while continuing to pass inspections on paper. 29 men clocked in that Monday because the paperwork said the air underground was fine. Number 15. Hawks Nest Tunnel, Fayette County, West Virginia. In the early 1930s, nearly 3,000 laborers drilled a 3-mile tunnel straight through nearly pure silica rock, part of a hydroelectric project meant to power a nearby metals plant, breathing air so thick with dust it blinded them, without masks, because supervisors only wore protective gear when inspectors were scheduled to visit. Historians studying medical and legal records now place the death toll above 700, most of them black migrant workers whose graves went unmarked for decades afterward. It stands as the deadliest single industrial disaster in American history, and most people watching this have never once heard of it. Number 14. Buffalo Creek, Logan County, West Virginia. On February 26, 1972, a coal slurry dam built directly on top of loose mining waste, backed by nothing more than a supervisor's rough hand sketch instead of an actual engineering plan, gave way after days of steady rain. It had been officially declared satisfactory by a federal mine inspector only 4 days earlier. A black flood wave over 30 feet high tore through 16 separate communities in roughly 3 hours, destroying or damaging over 500 homes, killing 125 people, and leaving 4,000 residents instantly homeless. The coal company's official legal defense, in writing, blamed it all on an act of God. Number 13. The Martin County Coal Slurry Spill, Martin County, Kentucky. In October of 2000, the floor of a slurry impoundment ruptured straight into an abandoned mine shaft sitting directly beneath it, sending an estimated 300 million gallons of toxic black sludge pouring into local creeks and covering some yards 5 feet deep, roughly 30 times the volume of the Exxon Valdez. And it contaminated the drinking water of tens of thousands of people downstream for years. The eventual federal penalty for the entire disaster totaled $5,600. Do the math, and that comes out to about 2 cents for every gallon of poison released into the water table. We're right at the halfway mark now, and if this list has already surprised you once, that's exactly what the subscribe button is for. The next 10 entries are the ones locals argue about hardest, in comment sections from Bristol to Boone. because these aren't just history you read about. They're places people actually drive to on a Saturday afternoon with their kids in the back seat. Let's keep the countdown moving. Number 12. Western North Carolina, in the wake of Hurricane Helene, September 2024. The storm dropped more than 30 inches of rain on some mountain communities in a single stretch, a total that shattered every historic flood record on file, including the previous benchmark set back in 1916. In Erwin, Tennessee, the Nolichucky River surged to 162 times its normal flow, tearing out bridges and sweeping a factory parking lot downstream with workers still standing in it. The mountain village of Chimney Rock lost its entire main street in a single afternoon. At least 108 people died across North Carolina alone. This happened less than 2 years before you're watching this video, in mountains most Americans still assume are hurricane-proof. Number 11. Eastern Kentucky, July 2022. Days of torrential rain pushed the North Fork of the Kentucky River to a record crest above 43 feet at Jackson, more than 6 feet higher than the previous all-time record, while over 600 people had to be pulled to safety by helicopter and boat. Entire hollows vanished underwater overnight while people slept. 45 people died, several of them children swept away from their parents' grip in the current. Researchers who later mapped the fatalities found many clustered near old mountaintop removal mining sites, where stripped, hardened land simply cannot absorb heavy rain the way an intact forest could. Number 10. Devil's Bathtub, Scott County, Virginia. This turquoise swimming hole, carved smooth into solid rock along a creek called Devil's Fork, looks exactly like a postcard. And that is precisely the problem. Reaching it requires crossing the same creek more than a dozen times, and the narrow hollow around it funnels rainwater into flash floods with almost no warning at all. During one single Memorial Day weekend, 20 stranded hikers had to be pulled out by helicopter and swiftwater rescue teams working through the night. Local fire departments now field somewhere around 30 to 32 rescue calls here every single year. The posted warning sign is blunt. Do not attempt this trail if the water is above your knees. Number 9. Linville Gorge, Burke County, North Carolina. Nicknamed the Grand Canyon of the East, this 1,400-foot deep wilderness area runs about 12 miles long and has almost no trail markers by design, and cell service disappears the moment you drop below the rim. Local rescue crews haul out 45 to 50 lost or injured hikers here every single year, sometimes by helicopter. When Hurricane Helene struck in 2024, the Linville River's flow rate spiked from under 100 cubic feet per second to more than 28,000, a flood that shattered every previous record on the books. This gorge doesn't just look untamed for the cameras. It genuinely is. Number 8. Seneca Rocks, Pendleton County, West Virginia. This 900-foot crag is the only true summit on the entire East Coast that can only be reached by technical rock climbing, since no hiking trail runs to the top, with over 400 mapped routes crossing its faces. A weathered sign near the summit keeps an unofficial tally, and it currently reads 24 climbers who have fallen to their deaths here since the 1960s. In 1987, an entire rock pillar that climbers had nicknamed the Gendarme simply detached and fell off the mountain on a completely calm afternoon, for no cause investigators were ever able to determine. Number 7. Old Rag Mountain, inside Shenandoah National Park, Virginia. It's the single most popular hike in the entire park, and rangers will tell you flatly it's also the most dangerous. Thanks to a mile-long boulder scramble that has stranded even physically fit hikers well after dark, with rescues logged several dozen times a year. In one widely reported case, a 21-year-old fell 170 feet off a cliff edge while trying to retrieve a hat that had blown off his head, dislocating his ankle badly, and had to be carried out afterward by a team of roughly 20 rescuers. By every normal measure, that fall should not have been survivable. He lived, but only barely. Number 6. Nantahala Gorge, Swain County, North Carolina. More than 2 million people have rafted this river since commercial trips began in the 1980s, and it's marketed hard as beginner-friendly whitewater, which, for the most part, it genuinely is. But 8 people have still drowned here since 1990, most from something called foot entrapment, where a swimmer's foot wedges tight between underwater rocks and the current simply refuses to let go. And the water is cold enough that resuscitation attempts sometimes still work long after they normally wouldn't. The real danger on this river was never the visible rapids. It's the ones hiding invisibly under 2 feet of clear, calm-looking water. Number 5. The Tail of the Dragon at Deals Gap, straddling the Tennessee and North Carolina line. 318 tight curves packed into just 11 miles of mountain highway. A magnet for motorcyclists and sports car drivers chasing the perfect lean angle through the Smokies. Since 1995, this stretch of road has averaged roughly 1.5 motorcyclist deaths every single year. And a roadside oak that locals call the Tree of Shame is decorated with wreckage from riders who simply never made the next curve. The posted speed limit is 30 miles an hour. Almost nobody actually obeys it. Number 4. The New River Gorge Bridge, Fayette County, West Virginia. Standing 876 feet above the river below, it's one of the highest vehicular bridges anywhere in the country. And once a year, on the officially sanctioned Bridge Day, hundreds of base jumpers legally leap off it in one of only 2 events, like it permitted anywhere in America, watched by roughly 100,000 spectators lining the gorge. 4 jumpers have died here since the tradition began in 1980, including one man who, decades earlier, had been among the very first people on Earth to base jump off Yosemite's El Capitan. Even the pioneers of the sport weren't immune to this bridge. Number 3. The Gatlinburg Wildfire, Sevier County, Tennessee, November 2016. A small fire smoldering for days near a peak called Chimney Tops suddenly met wind gusts topping 80 miles an hour during an exceptional regional drought, and within hours it exploded from about 70 acres to 17,000, jumping straight out of the national park and tearing into a town packed with residents and tourists. 14 people died, more than 2,000 buildings burned to the ground, and the deadliest wildfire in Tennessee's recorded history unfolded in a place most visitors picture as pure calendar scenery. Not fire country at all. Number 2. The Blue Ridge Parkway, winding through Virginia and North Carolina. In 2025, it was the single most visited unit in the entire national park system, drawing more traffic than Yellowstone and Yosemite combined, and in that same year, it also ranked as the second deadliest, trailing only Great Smoky Mountains itself. 469 miles long, with no guardrails on many of its blind curves, wildlife wandering onto the pavement at dusk, and drivers constantly glancing at the view instead of the road ahead of them. That year alone, fatalities on the parkway ranged from motorcyclists hitting deer to a cyclist struck while riding the shoulder to hikers falling near waterfalls just off the road. Motor vehicle crashes remain the single leading cause of death here year after year, on a scenic road built for exactly the kind of distracted driving that keeps killing people on it. And that brings us to number 1. And honestly, this one isn't really a single location at all. It's the thing quietly hiding underneath every other entry on this list. Great Smoky Mountains National Park, straddling the border of Tennessee and North Carolina, is the single most visited national park in the entire country, pulling in more than 12 million people every year, and by some counts over 14 million. Since 2007, at least 150 people have died somewhere inside its boundaries, the vast majority of them men. Not mostly from bears, which have killed exactly one person in the park's entire recorded history. Not mostly from cliffs, either. The leading cause of death here, year after year, is motor vehicle crashes on its 380 miles of winding mountain roads, followed by drownings and falls. The Smokies aren't dangerous because they're remote or extreme in any way. They're dangerous for the exact opposite reason. They're familiar, they're crowded, and they are endlessly, deceptively easy to underestimate. Every single place on this entire list shares that same quiet trap in one form or another. It looks safe from the overlook. The geography never actually agreed to that deal. So here's the real question for the comments. Have you personally stood on any of these 20 spots? And did we rank the danger right, or did we completely miss the one local story your whole town still argues about at Thanksgiving dinner? Tell us exactly where you're watching from and what we got wrong, because whatever blows up in this comment section is genuinely what decides the next list on this channel. If this kept you watching all the way to the end, you already know exactly what to do next. Hit subscribe, and we'll see you out on the next ridge.